Welcome to Asia in Review at Think Tech Hawaii, coming to you from Pioneer Plaza at downtown Honolulu. I'm your host, Hong Jiang, Associate Professor of Geography from University of Hawaii at Manoa. And my special guests today are Dr. Camilo Mora, Assistant Professor, and Ryan Longman, a PhD student, both from the Geography Department at University of Hawaii at Manoa. And our topic today is get ready for a hotter climate. We know that global warming is happening, but when will the critical time of climate change come? In today's program, we'll learn more from the experts about the timing of global warming. And at the end of the show, I bet you're going to say to yourself, wow, a hotter climate is coming sooner than I expected, much sooner. So Camilo and Ryan, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Maybe you can tell our viewers just briefly what you each do in your work.
Yes. Well, I'm a professor at the University of Hawaii here at Manoa, and we are specializing on the use of software to analyze large-scale databases. And pretty much what we're trying to do is to put numbers into several environmental issues that are happening today, like climate change, biodiversity loss, how many species are going extinct, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Big questions.
Big questions.
Yeah. Ryan?
So I'm a PhD student at the department, and typically I focus on the question of how is climate changing at high elevations here in Hawaii. And I look at different climate variables like solar radiation and relative humidity, and I'm trying to get down to the bottom of understanding how these changes are affecting water resources, and how these resources, if they are affected, are going to trickle down to affect species and humans. And just recently I got to work with Camilo and expand my horizons and actually tackle a global question, which I originally had thought was a little out of my scope, but thanks to Camilo, he showed me I could do it.
Great, and you, Camilo, you and your team has made a great, exceptional achievement from your recent publication in the top science journal, Nature. And I want to bring that up, and that's partly why we want to bring you here to give you the cutting edge knowledge about what's happening with our understanding of global warming. So the producer, can we bring up the slide number 1? Which is what's triggering our interview with these two experts here. And that is a published paper on Nature. In Nature, it's called The Projected Timing of a Climate Departure from Recent Variability. Sorry. I know we're going to deal with these big terms, scientific terms over here. So this is, as I counted, how many, there are altogether about 14 authors, and Camilo, you're the lead author. And the paper has been the most cited, most viewed during the week it was published, and remain on the top 1 percentile of the most viewed paper in Nature, period. And we talk about a huge response of your paper. So tell us a little bit about, well, first of all, what is the paper is trying to tell us, and why it's generating such an enthusiasm about the paper?
Yes, well, this paper has a very interesting story behind. It was developed as part of a graduate class that I'm developing at the university. And basically the idea of this class is to engage students in the analysis of big databases, trying to answer big questions that are out there. And this is the second time that we have done this class. This is the first time that we succeeded on publishing this paper, on publishing the paper out of the class. And basically responding to your first question of what is the thing that we did. Once we started the class, the idea was to answer any question regarding climate change. Okay, how much do we know about climate change? We spent an incredible amount of time reviewing papers about climate change, and it was amazing because after about 1 month, 2 months working on this, there were several piles of papers on top of our desk there. And there was a huge pile of papers regarding the magnitude of climate change. Do you know how much change we're going to see within the next 100 years? There are a lot of papers on that.
Yeah.
There are just as many papers on where are these places on Earth that are going to experience the largest changes in climate change. And where are these changes going to be novel? Places where climate has never been like what we are going to be seeing in the next 100 years. However, our pile of papers was very small when we were asking the question of when is climate change going to happen. You know, that you will think that that's one of the most basic questions on climate change, yet is one for which we had very limited information. And that's what we decided to do, focus all of our attention into answering this question of when is climate change going to happen. Ryan is going to elaborate now on how is that we came out to develop the index that we use for answering this question.
And before that, I just want to remind our viewers that this research has produced some very, very important insight about when that climate regime is going to change. And stay tuned.
So slide 3, maybe?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you bring up to slide 3?
Let's bring up slide number 3.
I can look at it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me walk you through here how we developed our metric. And if you look at this slide here, on the x-axis, which is the lower axis, you'll see year. Okay, and the year extends back about 150 years into the past and forward about 90 years into the future. And on the y-axis, you have temperature in degrees Celsius. Now, if you look at that blue line in the past, you can see that that's temperature, and that shows how temperature fluctuates over time. And you can see that there's ups and downs, but really there's kind of this stable trend going on. And if you look at that gray box, that box kind of defines where we've had the maximum and the minimum temperatures in the past, okay, averaged over a year. Now, as you go into the future, you see that we have very different scenarios playing out. And that red line there is a business as usual scenario, which means we do nothing to reduce our CO2 input into the atmosphere. And we have this yellow line that shows a concerted mitigation effort where we actually do something about the CO2 in the atmosphere. And you can see that both of these lines, once the temperature moves past this historical variability, this gray box, we consider that the year in which climate has changed to a whole different operational level, a year in which the coldest year of the future is warmer than the warmest year of the past. And you can see that under both of those scenarios, they're two very different years. And we did this metric we used 39 models, and we did it for the entire globe, and these we averaged everything across the globe. And for the business as usual scenario, we had a global mean of 2047, and for our mitigation effort, we had a global mean of 2069, which has a lot of implications to it in itself.
Let's look at let's talk about the first scenario. Let's say business as usual. What do you mean? What do you expect for the average year 2047 when you say that a climate regime has changed? Meaning we're facing a totally new climate. What does it mean, and what do you expect to see?
Well, first of all, let me explain again this 2047. 2047 is the year after which the climate is going to become completely different of what we have seen in the last 200 years.
So nothing we ever expected.
Nothing. You can look back in your life, think about the hottest and coldest year in your life, and by 2047, according to this scenario, temperatures passing that year are going to be warmer than whatever you saw in the last 150 years.
All of us are going to live, but they live to that time, and we're going to actually see it. Well, it's amazing.
It is pretty amazing, and we go back to the question that you asked initially of why is that this paper generated so much interest from the media.
Yeah.
Is because before, most of the conversation regarding climate change was about the changes that our children and grandchildren were going to experience. We thought that this was like long term into the future. It turns out that these results, what we have shown is that we are going to be living to see this.
That's right. Yeah.
By the time that this is coming down, I'm going to be 60 years old.
Wow, and long many years to go after that. And so, is this correct to say that by that time, the coldest year you will experience from then on would be warmer than the warmest year ever before that?
That's correct.
And that we're talking about a whole new environment, a whole new climate.
It is pretty scary, really. You think about this thing. And the reason why I find this pretty scary is because in our knowledge, If you look back in the last 100, 200 years, we had experienced years in which temperatures had been pretty hot. Coral reefs, for instance, incredible amount of mortality as a result of temperatures exceeding the natural variability. So what we're talking about here is something that is not going to be sporadic anymore. It's something that is going to be completely permanent, and we know that these ecosystems, they respond to those changes. And the way in which they respond is by usually facing massive die-offs. And we have observed that in coral reefs, tropical forests, species will be faced with this challenge.
And some of these we are going to experience here in Hawaii.
Oh, Hawaii is going to be impacted, I believe, very dramatically. The reason being that it's a very isolated place. You know, in other places, you had the chances of populations that are not impacted as much to colonize the species that were staying in Hawaii. The problem with Hawaii is that since it's so isolated, that possibility is very small. If a species goes extinct in Hawaii, there's very limited chance that you will have a species from somewhere else coming and colonizing this habitat again.
So those kind of isolated places could be impacted even more.
That's correct, just because of the isolation itself.
That's interesting. Want to add anything to this 2047?
Well, I mean, just to clarify that number, this study was very data rich, and there was lots of ways to look at the data. The 2047 is basically a global average. So actually, some places are not going to experience a new climate at that year, while other places are going to have reached that way before that. So I think one really important aspect about this study is that its spatial extent and the way we present the data. You can actually go to any spot on the globe and see where that particular climate's going to exceed those historical thresholds, and that's something that really allowed the study to gain a lot of popularity, is that people could actually relate to this. They could actually see where they live and how that date corresponded to their lives, and actually see what the magnitude was going to be, and it really helped the study kind of gain a lot of press and a lot of enthusiasm.
And I understand your research also has particular implications to something to say about the tropical area. So after, we're going to take a short break, and after that, we're going to come back and explore that. And this is Asia in Review at Think Tech Hawaii, and I'm your host, Hong Jiang. I forgot to mention that the viewers out there, if you're watching us live streaming, you can actually tweet us. The address is ThinkTechHi, ThinkTechHI. And you can tweet your questions, and we're going to address it toward the end of this interview. And we'll take a short break. We'll be coming right back.
Aloha, I'm Nicole Horry for Think Tech. For nearly half a century, the Hawaii Foreign Trade Zone No. 9 has brought the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone program to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. DBET, the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism, operates Hawaii's Foreign Trade Zone program to encourage international business and economic development. The Foreign Trade Zone's mission is to increase the amount of international trading activity in Hawaii, thereby providing employment opportunities for the residents of our island state. For more information, see ftz9.org. I'm Nicole Horry. Mahalo.
Aloha, I'm Maria Kashem of Think Tech Hawaii, and I want to tell you about our Think Tech talk shows. If you didn't know it, Think Tech streams video and audio for all of its shows live on the internet from 2 to 5 p.m. every weekday afternoon, and we replay them all night long on ustream.tv. Visit thinktechhawaii.com for our live stream and YouTube links. Raise your awareness on Think Tech. I'm Maria Kashem, and I'll see you there.
Hi, we're back. We're live, coming to you from Think Tech Hawaii at downtown Honolulu. And I'm your host, Hong Jiang, and we've been speaking with Professor Camilo Mora and Ryan Longman, both from UH Manoa, about climate changes. And today's topic is get ready for a hotter climate. So right before the break, we were just talking about the significant year of 2047, when we're going to experience this new regime of the climate, how much hotter. And there were something in your research you had about the tropical area. And there was a year 2020 somewhere in there, which is much earlier than 2047. Can you explain that?
Yeah, can we bring up that slide number 4, I think
So slide number 4, yeah.
Yeah. So one of the unique things about this study, like I mentioned before, is that we were able to do this analysis for the entire globe. And this is a map here kind of showing the averages of all the models that we use. We use 39 models in this study. And you can see there that if you were just to briefly explain this here, the areas that are the lighter colors, the oranges and the yellows, are a earlier departure time, which means climate will change at an earlier year. And the darker greens and the blues are showing that climate change will occur at a much later year. And you can see one striking characteristic is that in the tropics there, you see a lot of reds, which means that the climate change under the metric that we use is going to occur in the tropics sooner than everywhere else on the planet. Mm-hmm. And some of these dates are 2020 is the earliest one, so that's right around the corner. And I think Camilo is going to talk a little bit more about some of those implications. Mm-hmm. to the.
Yeah, that's actually one of the important findings of this paper is the fact that tropical places are going to be impacted by climate change earlier than anywhere else in the world. Mm-hmm. Before, most of the understanding of climate change was suggesting that the largest changes were going to happen at the poles.
That's right, the higher latitude areas.
The higher latitude areas, the reason being that those are the places where the largest changes in the climate mm-hmm. are going to occur. Our paper actually showing the opposite. The reason being that in the tropics, the variability in the climate is very small. So it's very easy for climate change to exceed those historical bounds. Meaning that at the tropics, the places that are going to be facing unprecedented climates first. The tropics, the changes are going to be larger, but it turns out that in an annual cycle, the variability is quite large. Mm-hmm. The reason why this is important is because species at higher latitudes, they are already adapted to a huge variability in the climate. So in their genes, they have the capacity to adapt to these changes that are coming. Mm-hmm. The species in the tropics, in contrast, since their climate is not so viable, they cannot adapt to these changes. Mm-hmm. Meaning that these changes in the tropics, despite this fact that they are small, are going to exceed what these species can tolerate. There are going to be three important consequences for a species and several consequences for humans. The three important consequences for a species are, first, the species will stay in the places where they are right now, and they will try to adapt to these changes. Mm-hmm. The problem with that possibility is that these changes are happening very fast, perhaps faster than what the species will use for adaptation. Mm-hmm. So that's one possibility. The other possibility that they will face is to move to places where the climates are now better. And you are seeing that, you can see that now on some species that are moving towards higher latitudes. The reason being that the tropics are getting too hot, and now the conditions that they like to be in are now being displaced towards higher latitudes. Mm-hmm. That's a possibility. The third possibility is that neither one of the first two are possible and the species goes extinct.
That's right, they just die out, basically.
They just die out.
Yeah.
And that is possible again for many species, like species in Hawaii, where they don't have the chance to move somewhere up north. Mm-hmm. The reason being that
there's nowhere to move to.
There is nowhere to move to.
That's right, yeah.
So those are some of the consequences for a species. I believe there are going to be some ecosystems that are going to be impacted more than others. Mm-hmm. For instance, for coral reefs, I believe an increasing temperature of this magnitude is pretty much like a death sentence.
Oh, wow.
The reason being that these species, they're already too close to their tolerance. The tolerance is too close to the actual temperature of the ocean already. Mm-hmm. So when you exceed the temperature and it remains high, these species, they usually die.
So you're saying that we might just see some of this impact in the coral reef, in the ocean system around Hawaii?
Yes, and in fact, perhaps it's not going to be so dramatic in Hawaii since it's at mid-latitudes.
A bit higher than the tropics.
Yes, the tropics are perhaps the places that are going to be impacted the most, especially ecosystems like coral reefs. However, there are also forest ecosystems, and during the last 3 or 4 decades, there have been multiple reports of massive die-offs of species that simply die because it's just too hot for them.
Wow.
And so those are some of the responses for the species. But you also need to take into consideration the responses for us.
That's right.
For us humans.
What can we do?
Well, first let me tell you what will happen to us.
Yeah.
Right? One possibility is that the temperatures just get too hot for us to even survive. You might think this is a pretty extreme situation, but let me tell you that, for instance, in Europe in 2003, there was a massive heat wave that killed over 50,000 people. You know, especially people of all age, people that had no access to air conditionings. These temperatures were too hot for these people and they died. 50,000 people died. And it's interesting because right now one of the projects that we're trying to develop is looking at these extreme heat waves. And there are multiple reports of these heat waves killing people in Australia, Japan, China, meaning that not only species are going to be faced with the challenge of moving and going extinct, us are going to be faced with that as well. The other impact of these changes might be indirect. And since the climate is going to impact the capacity of ecosystems to produce goods and services like agriculture, I believe there's going to be an incredible potential for people to start moving to places where the conditions are better. And let me just give you an example, a couple of examples on this. One is, for instance, Mexico. If the capacity of Mexico, the land in Mexico to produce agriculture is reduced because of climate change, that means that all of this sector, all of the jobs in this sector are going to reduce. So all of these people that is unemployed in Mexico, guess what they are going to be doing? Most likely they are going to be migrating to the United States to get better access to resources. Of course, generating this tension there in this border. Another example is what is happening in Indonesia. According to our studies, what Ryan just showed there, Indonesia is going to be one of the places that are going to be facing unprecedented climate first. We already know this massive migration of people from Indonesia to Australia. So if the conditions for the livelihoods of people in Indonesia start being impaired, well, I bet these people is going to start migrating towards Australia even more. So we had consequences from these things, not only for species, but also for us humans.
And all of these consequences you talk about are impacting every place in the world. You are talking about a major global shift.
Yeah, I think that's something that you can look at that map and develop a false sense of security if you don't live in one of those red areas. You could think, oh, I'm safe, my area is blue, it's not going to happen until much later, I'll be long and gone by the time climate change reaches me. But really the tropics are what produce a lot of the goods and services that people depend on that they don't even think about. A lot of the food sources, a lot of the products that people eat and survive on and depend on are going to be affected by these changes. And I think that's something that gets overlooked often. So what people need to understand is that the changes that are happening are going to have rippling effects across the entire globe, and really nowhere is safe from these changes.
I think that that's a very important point, you know, and that's an appreciation that you get once you start doing this analysis at a global scale, is that there is no planet United States, there is no planet Canada, there is no planet China, there is planet Earth.
That's right.
And it's interconnected that these changes that you see on tropical areas, as Ryan just said, are going to cascade down throughout the whole planet.
This is certainly a message that we need to get out. More people need to know because it's coming up much sooner than we think. And we are still thinking that, hey, globalization, we have a great future, but think about the new conditions. So talk about the new conditions, talk about the interest that your paper has generated. I wonder about the backlash, because I know there are a group of people out there keep saying, well, global warming is not happening.
Yes, I mean, we prepared very well for the outreach of this paper. We got very lucky to work in collaboration with Nancy Barron from Compass and a few other people on her team, and they really gave us very good training on trying to communicate this paper to the media. Despite that, we got a massive backlash, you know, and there was a lot of people that was not really happy with us delivering this message to the people.
Yeah.
It's very interesting because we try to keep our analysis just based on data.
That's
we
right.
never move beyond the data itself. Trying to remove or understand or speculation of this. No, we completely got rid of that. It was just pure data, and the data doesn't lie. The data is telling you climate change is going to happen, and it's going to happen pretty soon. The best data that is out there we put together, 39 models, all of them in this paper, yet there was an incredible amount of people that didn't like this message out there.
Do you get personal calls, email messages, personal attacks?
Well, I got a few. Did you ever get one?
No, I've seen some things online, people that comment on certain articles and things like that. And really, I would say in general, from the scientific community, the paper was very well revered. There were some people that questioned maybe some of our metrics, but really we put everything out there. We did the work and we showed everybody what we did, and we're standing behind the paper, and we're really confident about the science that was involved in this. So,
for our viewers out there, if you're interested, you can check on the website of Nature. And that's where I see all of your supporting documents and all the graphs. And one of the graphs I saw was like data points for your work. And how many data points you had? Like millions of data points covering the globe.
That's correct. We analyzed over close to 60,000 points on the planet. And every one of those points has about 300 years of data.
Wow.
Times 39 models. So in total, we processed close to 2 million maps for this paper.
That's a very, very data-intensive work that you have done. And again, the message is an alarming one. So we're going to take another short break. This is Asia in Review at ThinkTech Hawaii. And we've been talking about the climate change, getting ready for a hotter climate. When we come back, we'll have more. Again, for our live streaming viewers, you can tweet your questions to ThinkTech High, and we're going to address them at the very end before we close for the interview today. We'll be right back.
Aloha, I'm Nicole Hori for ThinkTech. For nearly half a century, the Hawaii Foreign Trade Zone No. 9 has brought the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone program to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. DBET, the Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism, operates Hawaii's Foreign Trade Zone program to encourage international business and economic development. The Foreign Trade Zone's mission is to increase the amount of international trading activity in Hawaii, thereby providing employment opportunities for the residents of our island state. For more information, see ftz9.org. I'm Nicole Hori. Mahalo.
Still studying this, but there's some questions.
We are back. We're live, coming to you from Pioneer Plaza at downtown Honolulu. This is ThinkTech Hawaii at Asia in Review. And we've been discussing with our experts, Camilo, Mora, and Ryan Longman, about climate change, getting ready for a hotter climate. So look like we are hearing alarming messages of how quickly global climate is going to change. The whole regime of climate is going to change. We're talking about 2020 and 2047. And again, we're going to address these questions from Twitter at the last after the next break. So you talk about two scenarios. One is business as usual, and the critical average year that we're going to see the change is 2020 or 2047. The second scenario is, can you tell us a bit more about the second scenario?
Yes.
Yeah, so these models, they run with these different scenarios, like you just explained, and you put these inputs in based on certain criteria. The business as usual will say we do nothing about, mitigating or changing the way we live our lives and the amount of CO2 we put in the atmosphere. But the second scenario that we looked at was a concerted mitigation effort, which means we do something to reduce these greenhouse gases. And there was a couple of surprising things that came out of this analysis, because this is really an effort that would take global cooperation to do. And when you actually run that model scenario with this concerted mitigation effort, you see that this year of climate departure is pushed back significantly in some places. For the global average, it's pushed back nearly over 20 years to 2069. Now, there's two ways to look at that. You can be pessimistic and say, oh, well, it's going to happen anyway. What's the big deal? Why should we do anything? But we choose to kind of look at it more optimistically and say that, well, that 20 years, a lot could happen in that 20 years. For one, you could allow species could possibly have enough time to adapt. Humans could have enough time to adapt within that 20 years. And really, technology could come up with some solutions within that 20 years that allow us to not push beyond that threshold. So whereas it seems to be kind of unrealistic at this point, I think it's important to put that information out there to show that if we act, we do buy ourselves time for the future.
One question maybe I can address now is from Twitter, is what kind of government action would be helpful? Especially in terms of bringing up, hopefully, the second scenario, right? Would government be an important part?
Yeah, I mean, that's a slippery slope. We did not actually kind of do that analysis in the paper, but I mean, just speaking in a real general terms, you know, it has to be kind of, I mean, just the whole issue of climate change needs to kind of be put out there as something that's actually happening and not something that's debatable anymore. And no matter what, you still see the rhetoric in the news, you'll still see the news sources publishing information saying that it might be happening or it might not be happening, and I think that the first step would be outwardly declaring that it's happening and we need to some cooperation.
I agree with Ryan. You know, we didn't really do any analysis to respond to that question. However, I can tell you that there are multiple suggestions that have been put out there on how can we address the issue of climate change. I'm not really going to deal with that because I had my own opinion on the solution to this problem. And as a person that is coming from the third world, I get a better appreciation of the overall impact of people in the developing world and people here in the developed world. And for me, it became very clear that we can just...
Can you tell us where you're from?
I'm Colombian. I come from a part of the jungle in Colombia that during my lifetime has seen a massive transformation of the environment. I went from being in a place where I was used to go fishing on this river where I got fish like this big to now seeing just water, black water going through this river. An incredible transformation of the environment in just 20 years. For me, throughout many of the studies that I have been doing, it became very clear that we cannot address any of these issues without better addressing the problem of population growth. Let me give you a specific example about climate change. The IPCC came out with this list of multiple suggestions of what the individual can do to reduce the emission of greenhouse gases. Everything that we do is going to consume energy, like the lights that we use, the car that we use this morning, the bus that I took, the airplane that I use over the holidays, all of these things, they take energy to produce. So the IPCC came with this list telling you what kind of things you can stop doing to reduce your emission of greenhouse gases. There was this paper that took all of those suggestions and look at the cumulative CO2 that a person will produce. So there was an incredible reduction. However, this person were to have one child, this reduction will be, the amount of CO2 that is safe is 40 times what this person will produce if he were to have that child. So it really doesn't matter what kind of solutions you do, you start bringing more people into the equation. And of course, if the children are coming from the developed world, you can multiply that in impact, addition, consumption by 40 times compared to a person from China or India, where the consumption of resources is a lot small. So in my opinion, we need to start getting more serious about this debate on family planning and reduction of population growth. Without that, I doubt there's going to be any solution that will minimize not only the impacts of climate change, but the massive impact that we are having on the environment overall.
That's interesting. You talk about China and India. They were on the low consumption kind of level, but they are really increasing their consumption level as well, and that's going to be another huge addition to emission.
But can you really blame them though?
No, you can't.
How can you blame? I mean, exactly. The third world, you know, the thing that we want to do for all people down there is to improve the quality of our lives and hopefully get to a higher level of a standard that resembles what we live here in the first world.
That's right.
So you cannot really criticize their choice of having a better standard of living.
Exactly.
When we do have it. So that's the reason why for me it's very fundamental to address this issue of population growth. And actually, it's very interesting because if you think about this, usually people think of population growth as a problem that is happening in the developing world. Here in the United States, this is happening right here at home. You know, just the other day I saw on the news a photograph with Mitt Romney and his family. This single person was surrounded by 20 children, grandchildren.
I see.
Big
family.
Huge
some of the families.
So meaning that there is a huge problem, not only in economic terms, but also something related to our culture that make us want to have these huge families. And unfortunately, we already know very well that we can just not afford that anymore.
And so all of this is really just telling us how challenging it is to have the second scenario. You come back to the climate scenario there. To even delay the global warming time is very, very challenging. and it's very, very, very difficult. And plus, you not only have the population growth, even if the population stays stable, you still have an increased level of consumption, and also government, coming back to the whole government issue of government unwilling to enforce some of the emission quotas there. So we are really dealing with a huge question here. So overall, are you, optimistic about any modification we can do to bring from first scenario to the second scenario? How realistic it is?
Well, Ryan, do you mind elaborating where we are right now? You know, we analyzed 2 scenarios, but where we are right now.
All right, so where we are, we're basically approaching the 400 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere.
Okay.
That's a number that's well beyond the pre-industrial. When we started burning fossil fuels, it was around 250 at that point, and we've really increased it significantly in our lifetimes. But the business as usual puts us at about 850 parts per million into the future. And what that means is, a very significantly different climate. But what's really striking is that these models were developed a couple years ago, and the current trajectories that we're on are actually beyond that business as usual scenario. So we're actually kind of, the numbers we're presenting are probably optimistic in the sense where we're going to see these changes actually occurring even faster than this 2047 mark, just based on this population growth and this realistic understanding of what we're actually doing to the planet as far as CO2 emissions go. So it's actually probably more striking than we even presented.
Wow, the question I'm going to ask you, we're going to take another short break. The question I'm going to ask you is that, are we doomed? I want to think differently. I want you to give us some solutions there. This is Asia in Review at Think Tech Hawaii. I'm your host, Hong Jiang, and we've been talking about climate change. We'll be right back.
Aloha, I'm Nicole Horry for Think Tech. For nearly half a century, the Hawaii Foreign Trade Zone No. 9 has brought the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone program to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. DBET, the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism, operates Hawaii's Foreign Trade Zone program to encourage international business and economic development. The Foreign Trade Zone's mission is to increase the amount of international trading activity in Hawaii, thereby providing employment opportunities for the residents of our island state. For more information, see ftz9.org. I'm Nicole Horry. Mahalo.
Aloha, I'm Maria Kashem of Think Tech Hawaii, and I want to tell you about our Think Tech talk shows. If you didn't know it, Think Tech streams video and audio for all of its shows live on the internet from 2 to 5 p.m. every weekday afternoon, and we replay them all night long on ustream.tv. Visit thinktechhawaii.com for our live stream and YouTube links. Raise your awareness on Think Tech. I'm Maria Kashem, and I'll see you there.
We're back, we're live. This is Asia in Review at Think Tech Hawaii, coming to you from downtown Honolulu. And we've been speaking with Professor Camilo Mora and also Ryan Longman from UH Manoa about their work on climate change. And our topic is get ready for a hotter climate. So apparently this climate change trajectory is very, very alarming. And are we doomed?
Well, I don't ever like to look at it that way. I'm a glass half full kind of guy myself. I think that we are on the cusp of something very important, and I think that the good science that's coming out and the good communication of that science that's coming out is going to, bring us to this crossroads. We're standing there right now, and it's either we're going to do something about it or we're not. So, doomed. I mean, that's kind of that's a dark word. I don't think that everything on the planet's gonna die, but I do think that there's gonna be a lot of changes that our generation and then actually the generations to come are gonna face as a result of these actions and not acting. So one of the things of what can we do, the question of what can we do, I mean, you can look at this as an individual level, government level, but really the answer to that question is what we can do is, the worst thing we can do is nothing at all. And I think that's, a mentality that everybody has to have. Don't give up. It's always something that you can do.
And I think the government agencies really need to hear this, because maybe there's something if collectively we can still do. But in terms of the impact, impact on the species, impact on human beings, who has a better way out of this kind of a, looming disaster?
It is again, going back to the beginning of our conversation, it's pretty hard to say that anyone will benefit from this, given the interconnection of everything on this planet.
Yeah.
Now, regarding your question of whether we are doomed or not, I agree with Ryan that we need to have a positive view that we can fix this. The reason, my personal reason for this, is that we had no other planet to go to.
That's right.
If we mess up with the climate of this planet, we are stuck in here. So it's not like we had a choice of not doing anything. Something has to happen, and we have to fix this problem. As for doom or not, I don't think we're gonna get doomed as a species itself. However, what is gonna change quite a lot is the quality of our lives.
Okay.
Just imagine Australia or the United States during the last decade has experienced massive heat waves, massive extreme records in temperatures. I bet people were not very happy during those times. So the quality of our lives is going to be reduced quite a lot. As for species, unfortunately, many species are going to go extinct. That doesn't mean that all of the species are going to. There are going to be a lot of species that are going to find new opportunities to increase their abundances. So from the ecosystems themselves, we're going to see massive changes on the composition of those species there.
I guess we can just hope that humanity is creative enough to adapt to these changes, which is coming so fast.
I don't really wish we adapt to them. I wish rather we prevent whatever is necessary for adaptation. Let's prevent that error of
hopefully
happening.
we still have a chance there.
Yes, that is my ultimate goal. My ultimate dream is that we don't get to that position in which we have to adapt to it. Why do you want to mess up with something so unique as our planet? So no, to be honest with you, my personal opinion is that we should prevent these things from happening.
Let's all hope so. And I want to, in the next few minutes, bring up the question of kind of your research team a little bit more, because our audience out there probably are curious about research this magnitude, dealing with millions of data points, how the research team work, what disciplines they are coming from. I know you're both geographers.
Yes, that's a very good question. And in fact, one of the major criticisms that we got was that we were being paid by the government to scare off people.
Oh, this is none like that at all.
Part of reality. We used zero money, $0 to do this project. This project was done as a class exercise. And the idea of this course is that we identify a question, and in this specific class, we were about 12 students and 2 professors and 1 postdoc.
And these are grad students, right?
Grad students, that's correct. So what we did, we identified the question, and then we divided all of the different tasks of collecting this data among all of the students.
And what are the disciplines involved here?
We had 3 major streams for this project. One was the climate itself. All of these data on temperature, pH in the ocean, rainfall, all of these things. We put some students that are pretty good on that to get this data. Ryan was one of those students focusing on that stream. The second stream was biodiversity. So for that, we analyzed something on the order of 300,000 species. Where are those species in the planet and how much they're going to be impacted? For that, we focused a group of students to collect the data that is out there on those species. The final stream was on goods and services that humanity uses from biodiversity, and there were students collecting that data as well. At the end of the project, at the end of the semester, we put all of this data together, and that's how this paper came out to be.
Wow.
It will have cost millions of dollars to do this project by ourselves, plus the amount of time that it would have taken to do it as well. It took us 6 months to get it done.
Oh, wow.
It was a severe amount of dedication by everybody involved. There wasn't one person that didn't pull their weight on this, and there was a lot of late nights and a lot of, sentence by sentence through the paper, and I mean, it was an amazing group of people, and there was, like I said, not one person. Everybody did, equal share, and it was really amazing.
Sorry, I had to add a joke though that came out from this thing, because we spent so much time together. This is supposed to be a 3 hours course a week. We were spending like almost every day working on this thing up to 3 in the morning.
Oh my!
So when I was showing up, when I was arriving home, my wife was just like, "What's going on with you? What is this thing 3 in the morning?" Honey, I was just teaching class. So you can imagine how hard it was for her to believe that I was actually at home. She was probably thinking that I was having an affair or something.
Well, you are having an affair with the science, That's what's required to produce a great work like you do.
Yes.
Yeah. And this is a University of Hawaii at Manoa, based in the geography department, and you guys are producing amazing work, saving millions of dollars from the government, right?
Yes, thank you.
And we have just maybe a couple minutes left. I know there are a lot of media attention to your work. And do you say something? Would you like to say something about it? How many interviews have you gotten? I know what are the major sources? I know New York Times and all the major media.
Oh, the media was non-stop for about 2 weeks, and we were talking to reporters every 50 minutes. There, I mean, as you outlined, we cover all of the major news channels and pretty much every single continent. Isn't that correct, Ryan?
Except Antarctica.
Antarctica.
Yeah.
Wow.
But this article got to be displayed on pretty much every single continent.
Yeah.
One question I have, I know your work is very science-driven, and there are a lot of particular terms. The particular term that people may not even understand. If you say it like a climate variability, you had to kind of explain it in different language. What's the challenge of communicating scientific findings like this to the general public?
That actually I found to be the most difficult thing of this project overall. It took us about 6 months to do the whole project. It took us about 2 months just to prepare the message for communication to the general public.
Wow.
For about 2 months, we were working almost every day on how to communicate about 15 minutes of material to the general public.
Yeah, I mean, that's another, I look at the success of the paper in these 3 reasons. One is the connectability of the actual research. We used a year instead of something like a parts per million or CO2 concentration. Everybody can understand a year.
Yeah.
And then we actually did a global analysis so everybody can see where they are, or how it affects them. So that connected people to it. But then also just the amount of effort we put into getting this message in a communicable way. I mean, without that, the paper wouldn't have been as successful as it was. And I think that we owe a lot to the Compass team, like Camilo mentioned earlier, of actually guiding us to that point. But yeah, it was a huge component of the success of this paper.
Again, congratulations and wonderful work. A very, very important message. And our viewers out there, listen to this. We need to all rethink. I had to rethink about where I'm going to be 2020, 2047, and what the world is going to be. And hopefully we all are going to contribute to a better future. And this is Asia in Review, and thank you so much, Camilo and Ryan, for being with us.
Thank you very much for having
us.
And so we've been talking with Dr. Camilo Mora and Ryan Longman from UH Manoa about getting ready for a hotter climate. And I want to thank our production team, Ian Davidson, Communications Director Chrissy Golfigan, and our producer Jay Fidel. And I want to thank you, our viewers. I'll see you next Tuesday at Asia in Review. Thank you and goodbye.